was in middle school, actually in the state of North Carolina, the bus drivers could be high schoolers. And so the high schoolers would drive the buses to go pick up the kids, elementary, middle school, junior high, really, and take them to schools. And it worked out with their schedule because then they could drop everybody off and then get to classes at high school by the time it started.
Hey, this is The Big Story. Thanks for listening. Well, New York City was a fun, quick trip. Could spend a long time there. It is my absolute favorite place to go to get away. There's so many people around that it doesn't matter. You can just be out, do your thing, and nobody cares. Once I got back, went straight to the writing desk and head down at the keyboard all week. It's been a deep dive every day into the background and meaning of every aspect of this novel. And I've made some huge breakthroughs. Also, things for the comic book that I'm working on are really shaping up. I've found some interesting angles and flows to tie in with the artist's initial ideas. And I think I can make it really fun. I should be able to share some details in the next month or two. This week's guest is Kelly Yates. Kelly is a designer, an illustrator, and a writer. And he started making comics in the 90s. I remember him back when he was palling around with the people at Artemis Studios. And when I started going back to shows in the last few years, it's been great to connect with him and find all our mutual friends and touch points. So I intended to have him on the show a few months ago, but he wanted to wait till his Kickstarter was up, and it went up on Friday for Amber Adams, his sort of a trade collection, but kind of a standalone story. It's a really kind of a cool sci-fi jetpack Flash Gordon tale. And in just 4 days, he's now $400 shy of funding. It's an amazing start to his campaign, and it just seems like it's stretch goal city from here on. If you're into fun comic books, you should definitely check this one out. So this is me with Kelly Yates. You launched the Kickstarter, Kelly. I'm just going to dive right in here, and then we'll work our way around stuff.
Sure.
So so I've done one. I have been involved in a few Kickstarters, but I have only sort of done one comic book Kickstarter. Mm-hmm. And it's a full-time job.
Oh boy, is it. Oh boy, is it. So, well, I've seen so many other, so I launched my first creator-owned Kickstarter this past Friday, February 17th. And the idea behind it is it's called Amber Adams. It's basically kind of a female Flash Gordon, and it was originally published by Image Comics in 2008. And we can circle back to talk a little bit more about that later. But so the Kickstarter in particular, seeing all these people having success and failures, like where people had fallen through the cracks, like, oh, well, they really kind of messed up here, and where people were having successes, like how were they having those successes, even when they were not a mainstream person I'd maybe never heard of. It's like, wow, how are they getting $20,000 or whatever they're asking for? So it's kind of like really kind of impressed with how people were doing things. And so I started looking around, trying to figure out how to do it. A couple of buddies of mine had done it. Craig Rousseau and Todd Zego had done stuff with Perhapanauts and some of their books. And so I'd seen how they put them together. And I still feel like I didn't have like all the information that I needed. Like how do you really do this? And going through Kickstarter, you see something like, okay, well, this Kickstarter page looks nice. I get it. Oh, this doesn't make sense. So then I actually looked around, found this group called Comics Launch. It's a group that you pay to be a part of, but I really will hold them up as a really gold standard on how to do things. It's a really great involved community of people. Tyler James Vogel runs that group and everything, but just really insightful stuff. Really what printers to use, what printers not to use. How do you put together the best Kickstarter page? How do you, and before you even get to all that stuff, you got to build an audience. And that's one thing I'd always had missed out on when I was doing shows. I've done shows since probably about the mid '90s, before emails, and, but just like I try to kind of start a mailing list over the years and never really kind of gotten into jail just for my own side of not following up with it. But building a subscription list, I've got 200 dedicated people on a subscription, and I send out an email. I don't try to bug people, but if I can send out an email like once a month, just like, hey, look at this cool Doctor Who thing I'm working on, or hey, here's something, here's conventions I'm going to be at, or here's something I'm working on. I don't have to pepper them year round with stuff. I mean, week after week. Now I've definitely stepped it up leading up to the Kickstarter, but I can do more and appreciate those 200 subscribers more than if I ever had 10,000 people subscribe. I can do more 200 people behind me than 10,000 I don't really know.
Right.
So building that you call it a subscriber list, but it's a family, friends, and social network list. And so they really taught me how to, and that really helped me. That helped kind of firm up kind of the foundation of your Kickstarter page.
Yeah.
So that's really instrumental. But just, working through technical things with this group, they've been really informative about how to pull everything together. And at some point you gotta spread your wings yourself and just like, okay, great ideas, but here's what I'm going to do. But they helped me really build the foundation. And so I just had to figure out what I wanted to do. And Amber Adams was, again, a book I originally done years ago that had never been collected into a trade paperback. And I thought this would be a really good opportunity to kind of test the water with that Kickstarter.
Well, there's so many interesting things. The list, your supporters, that core audience is so important. There is this has got to go back a few years, and I've said it before, but you only need 500 people to support the thing that you want to do. Like that'll afford you a good life. And that's not asking a lot of money from these people. It's just, if you can get 500 people who dig what you do, to buy into what you have, you can live. And that's an amazing thing, because we think like we need to have tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people, but you don't. And getting that list that the sign up list at the conventions, and giving people something, and it's not they have to take something home with them, but the fact that you're sending them imagery or ideas or exciting information, they respond. They're like, oh, I dig what Kelly's putting out there. I'm super excited for when you announce the Kickstarter. Oh my gosh, this is exciting. And the person I dig is excited about the thing that they're about to share with us. And I think that's super important for us to remember, that it's not this popularity game where you have to have 10,000 people. It's a matter of really finding an audience that you could talk with. If it gets bigger, congratulations. That's wonderful. And the other one is that you said that you asked around. You went to go talk to people to find out further information, speaking to Todd in this comics launch group. Like when we did ours, we did it sort of half-assed in some ways, but we asked people like David Pepos, who's been super successful on Kickstarter, and now has got a great career writing for the majors, and a few other people who do insane numbers on Kickstarter. And these people are amazing resources, and they've really figured out the marketing and sales aspect of running a Kickstarter, which is a unique sales platform. It's nothing like that's existed before, and you really have to kind of crack that nut.
Well, I sit there and think, hindsight's always 20/20, but I think about when I was first launching my comics career, there was only one way to do it. It was really you either got picked up at Marvel or DC Image wasn't around at first. And, or if you did self-published, you had to go through Diamond. And man, that was a whole tricky another thing because, you couldn't just put out 2,000 copies. They had minimums, like you had to put out 5,000 and, color printing versus black and white printing and how much that was. And just, it's crazy how much it's changed. So, definitely, this is such a great time. I'm glad I'm able to take advantage of it now within my lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
But I just think about how different it could have been 20 years ago and how it would have changed my career probably to some degree, yeah, but go ahead.
Oh no. I'm just thinking like, that's like, I would say 90+% of the reason why so many of our peer group didn't make their own comic books. Mm-hmm. The barrier to entry was so high that it was so, it felt like some sort of arcane wisdom you had to acquire just to be able to do something like make a comic book and not do the physical work of making the comic book, because we got that part figured out. But then there's this whole other process. But now,
right. But that was even part of the process that was figuring out, because there was no way to know how to make comic books. Like their size, you draw them up twice the size and then you shrink it down. And then there's bleed. Right. What are bleed? There was still this whole, at that time, there's still the physical, how do you physically put this thing together? It was now you do webtoon and put it online and people around the world can see it in the next 6 seconds. It's amazing. But, we have seen so much growth as a society and a comic book. The creative comic book community has been amazing to see how much it's changed and morphed over the years. But kind of jumping back to a little bit of the subscriber list that I have, though, I know not everybody's going to be able to get a book or support the Kickstarter. I get that. But what I ask people to do is, if you want to support me financially by getting my book or backing it, great, fantastic. Thank you. If you can't, for whatever reason, like it's not your thing, really, you're just a supporter of me, but maybe that's not your thing. You don't have any money, whatever you have going on in your life. If you support me as a creator, just share it. Just share it with your family and friends or your circle, because there might be somebody that is interested, and that helps me because, I know we talk about numbers like, 6-figure numbers, whatever. Sure, money is great. Who doesn't need money or want money to survive to a certain extent? But just having the ability to be creative and have an outlet for it. You still need to make some money to cover your creative costs. So
sure. Yeah. That little rule in life. Yeah, no, it's super important, but and I sound like a broken record, but we are living in the greatest period of comic book production ever. And the variety of work being offered is just unparalleled. And there's a market for it. People are really interested in something different, something new, something fun, something scary. Like scary comics are back. Romance comics are back. Like the Western is back. Like this is great.
You're 1,000% right. There's so many, when I go into my local comic book store, I'm just amazed at the different variety. And that's almost a problem too. There's almost too much stuff in a way, not like, I'm not complaining about there's too much stuff,
no,
but
right.
there's too much stuff that I can't consume at all. You know what I mean? I'm just like, oh my gosh, I can't even get to them. I would have a stack, as high as the ceiling with the stuff I'd want to get. But yeah, no, it's a fantastic, there's so many different things available now. It's great. It's great. I still love my superheroes though.
Well, of course, for sure. And I think it's so strange because, we're living in this sort of, this is it. Comic books, film and television are all so spread out now. Like no longer do we have, big studios and 3 networks and 2 publishers. There is a wide range of this stuff. And so you have to really seek it out. Like you can't keep up with all the television shows and movies and comics and let alone novels out there. So we have to become really selective in the things that we do. So it becomes much more important as people who are creating things to be engaged with the people who are reading, watching, listening to the things that are being produced.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's the way you have to be engaged with your group, your Facebook group, your your Instagram group, whoever
Yep.
they might be. Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, and, sure, the romance of like sitting alone in a room and doing the thing and not have, and then letting, the publisher deal with it. Sure. That's great.
Yeah,
But I don't know but I think publishers demand engagement. They're not, they're not just saying, cool, we'll publish your book and you'll
right.
get a script next month. They really are expecting involvement.
Yeah. Well, and that's kind of where it's weird. Where you start talking about corporate America too, or corporations. Like they want you engaged. They want you to be part of it, and
Mm-hmm.
everything. So it is kind of it's a little tricky area and everything about. And I have to admit, I don't know how true it is or how much they look at it, but I get disheartened when I do hear things like, they won't hire an artist unless they have 10,000 followers or something like that. I don't know
Yeah.
true or not that is. But when I hear things like, so that's a concern, because we shouldn't be basing hiring people on how many followers they have on Twitter or Instagram. Where we should base it about like, that's cool ass art, and I want it in my book.
Yeah, and this is something that I had seen happen in the professional photography ranks for advertising. This is going maybe almost 10 years back, but they had started hiring photographers from Instagram who had like hundreds of thousands of followers for their campaigns, in some sort of conflated belief that those people would turn around and buy the motorcycles and the ads. Like, I don't know, like it was a very strange idea that they were, because no one is looking at an ad or clicking on an ad or looking, going from an ad on television to a website because they think the photography was great. Because they're not identifying a specific photographer. Like the message of the ad and the whole visual should all work together to, do the job to make you feel terrible about yourself so you want to buy this thing. But I was talking to people on these photo shoots and they were like, oh, these people don't even know how to they don't know how to make an image. They know how to take a picture when there's a picture presenting itself to them, but they don't know how to actually construct a photo with the team. And I suspect, don't know, I have no evidence of this, and I'm not knocking anybody particularly, but building a following base of drawings or paintings or whatever the thing you do is not the same as being a professional version of that in the publishing world, because there are things like deadlines and there's nuances and there is staying on model and all these elements that have to take place to be able to produce something like a comic book. So I would assume that might not be a long-standing rule with a publisher.
I wouldn't think so. But one thing always kind of used to get me is like, so, all right, so here's the dirty little secret that I always tell people that I have about me, and like, oh, you draw comic books all the time. That's cool, man. That's what you must do with your life. It's like, well, that's what I do part-time on the side at night when I get everybody to bed.
Yeah.
I actually have a full-time job during the day. So I work at a place called, it used to be VF, now it's Contour. So it's basically Wrangler and Lee Jeans. I'm a senior graphic designer with them. And so I work there. I love working there. And that's because it does engage me, but also provides me a way to provide for my family. Mortgage.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, I can take a vacation. Oh, benefits. Oh, 401k, would I love to do comic books full time? Sure. Yeah, absolutely. But the reality is I have a family to support. So
Yeah.
I've always kind of kept that going and then kept the comic books on the side going because that's been my passion. And everybody, I don't hide that from everybody at work. I'm like, comic books are my passion. I just can't quite make it full time yet doing it. So there's that. But one thing you used to always get under my skin a little bit is like, not just this, but I worked at ad agencies and other places I worked too. Is like, they would send something out to agencies in New York. Like, oh, this agency in New York, they know how to do this. And like, really, it's just people from like me from North Carolina or Iowa or Florida or California who moved to New York.
Yep.
And it doesn't make them better. It just means that they live in New York and they can charge you 10 times the price. And I mean, more times not, because when we worked with our internal company, we could produce stuff so much better because we actually understood what the product was and what needed to be. And that's not to say the agencies didn't come up with great things every once in a while, but it's like just because they're from New York and agencies based on it does not mean that they can turn in better designs. So
no, absolutely not. And though I was a long New Yorker for 25 years, and it is the thing that they have is the names have cachet. So the agencies that are being hired from, tier 1 cities, they're the ones who have, they won all these awards. They're going to con every year and getting Palme d'Ors because they produce this ad, and they're great and they do great work, but a lot of that can be done anywhere. It's just that. Yeah. So bug noted. The burr in your saddle. We got it. And I could see.
No, it's only everyone's like, crap, really? No.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. I mean, listen, the lots of people, when they hire an agency, they're looking to try to solve a problem that they haven't identified. So that's where, so if they can't identify it, often somebody outside can identify it, while the internal organization understands the product and the customer far better than anyone else externally, because you live it. You understand all this stuff on a cellular basis at this point. Oh, I get that.
But you're right about that too, because agencies, they do understand how to reach globally or nationally. They understand how to deliver, a specific theme or a message, like, versus internal. I mean, you're right about that. I mean, they definitely know how to present, but it is the cachet of it too. Like you walk into them, they have drinks all over the walls. Like, oh, we party after 5 o'clock.
Yeah. Yeah.
I get it.
Yeah.
Who doesn't want to go out to do photo shoots and hang out on photo shoots and act cool for a couple of days? I would.
It's the best. It's the best. I want to go do that. I want to go. I do it. I miss it.
Yeah.
Okay. So I guess, I mean, we both got into the business in the 90s when we first got into the racket. What was like, I mean, I'm always fascinated how people get into it one way or the other. Because you're talking this agency talk, which means you have this experience. Did you develop this experience previous to getting into comic books, or after, or during? How did you get into comics? How did you get into agency work?
All right,
internal work?
I'll try to make this the brief story, sort of. So
okay.
I got into comic books when I was 12 years old. I was on a road trip with my mom and grandparents. We left North Carolina, and we were doing a month-long road trip across the U.S. one summer, starting in North Carolina, going south out to California, and then we came back a northern route back home. When we stopped at Yellowstone, we stopped at the lodge out there and stayed overnight, and there were no TVs in the entire lodge, nothing. And this was like, 84. I've been 12 years old, 84. Okay. And, this was prime MTV. Like, this was me. There's no MTV, no nothing. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to die out here. Nothing to watch, my boom box in the car, whatever. But I went to the gift shop in the Yellowstone Lodge, and they had a couple of comic books down at the bottom, and I got like 2 of them just to read. And I can't remember what one of them was, but the first one was Chris Starr.
Book.
It had Nightcrawler on the cover. I was like, well, what is this? And I picked it up, and I was fascinated by it, and whatever the other book was, I can't remember what it was. So then when we got back home, I heard that there's a comic book store downtown Greensboro. And my mom's like, well, I'll take you down there, but I'm not going in. You got 10 minutes to run in and get what you get and whatever. So I went in there. I was just like, oh my gosh, it was just this comic book store with all the back, what you imagine, the back wall and the new books and the old books and everything. And that's where I just kind of fell in love with it. And then I got into my college years and actually worked in a comic book store for a couple of years. But in college, I was studying. I didn't know what I wanted to do. Like I said, I had that whole football background, and I was studying exercise sports science at the University of North Carolina at Greensboro. And I'm just like, gosh, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. Just couldn't quite figure it out. And I was reading these comic books, and I don't know, I was doodling a little bit on the side. And I remember this, I was doodling on the side. I was in this motor mechanics class, like muscles and stuff like that. And I'm doodling in the side. The guy's like, man, you ought to be an artist. And I'm not saying that was like the one thing that kicked me over, but it definitely started making me think a little bit more. And so I doodled a little bit. I doodled. And then just enough where I was total crap. I mean, just you see somebody like, ooh, they need a lot of work. I was that level, but I was interested in it. So I found out locally to me, there's a place called Guilford Technical Community College, a 2-year program. And I found out they had something called commercial art and computer graphics. I'm like, well, what the heck is that? Okay, that sounds interesting. So basically I ended up going there just to try to give it a shot. Like, let me see, because UNCG was just not the thing I needed to do. What I started liking about this technical school is they started teaching how to make a living, how to actually invoice people, how to do mechanicals, how to do all this stuff. And at that time, this would have been about 93, 94, something like that. They had 30 Macintosh computers in their building, the most in the state of North Carolina. Nobody had that many. And it was like, this is it. This is the beginning. I mean, North Carolina State, nobody had this many Macintoshes. But I remember sitting in my very first computer class, and the guy starts talking, okay, we'll turn on computers. We're going to do this tonight and everything. And I raised my hand. I'm like, how do you turn on a computer? Because I never had one in high school. I never had one. And he says, the button right here. I'm like, oh, great. And so here I am. It's a great I got a 2-year degree. I went to school for 6 years to get a 2-year degree once I figured it out. But I loved it. I started figuring out like, oh, I hated it, but cutting Ruby Lith out and how to do photostats. And I just started really, it was this, and I started learning the skill. I started taking some life drawing classes, but still reading comic books, loving comic books. I still had that side, but it was starting to kind of come together a little bit. And, I was doing the conventions. I was going to like Heroes Con in Charlotte. I was doing a couple of small local shows, just going to see what they were about and everything, and meeting a couple people. And so it's just all this weird work in the comic book store, meeting people, figuring it out, staying up late drawing, and this whole school thing kind of came together in some weird way. But yeah, so that's kind of where I landed with that whole thing.
Huh. That's it. Yeah. So, okay. So I mean, you gained a lot of the skill sets you need for the production side of, what an in-house, agency needs. And you were also gaining an understanding of how things are put together and gaining some drawing skills. So, and as you said, like the paths are getting closer and closer together. What was the sort of the kick to say, like, or how did you sort of, ruck up and say, I'm going to try something? Like, what was it that you could envision trying?
Well, I mean, everybody has, so I ended up joining a small studio here in Greensboro. I got Randy Green, Rick Ketchum, Corey Turnbull, a guy named Bill Ruth, and some other guys. And we had this small little group together, and we kind of like, some of them were more experienced than I, so I started picking up little things like that. But we all had the dream, like, oh, I want to work on an X-Men book when I get old enough, or figure out how to do this, or a Spider-Man book. And, I always loved the X-Men. So I thought it was fantastic. And I always had that dream as well. But, my skills just weren't there. I'm going to be honest with you. I mean, I didn't start drawing until I was 21.
Wow.
So it was literally a lot of like, and even now at 51, 30 years later, I feel like I'm playing catch up. I still feel like everybody else is better than me. So I got to keep trying,
Yeah.
So that's how I've always felt like behind in that. So that's kind of what that, and I would start getting like I'd get a pin up in a Caliber book, or I'd get a pin up in a Dark Horse book. So it was like little, all exciting things, but nothing really gelled. I could never kind of get in with Marvel or anybody like that. But there was one Heroes Con. It's kind of this I was working a graphic design job and kind of pursuing. So I've always dual tracked my career, comic books and graphic design. And I was at Heroes Con, and I'd met at the time, it was Mike Ringo and all those guys down at Art of the Studios. Hillsborough, North Carolina, right? So I got to go down there and meet them a couple times. Just in, Chuck Vojkovic, Casey Jones was there, Scott Hampton, Rich Case. Oh my gosh, who else? It's all Dave Johnson. I think was there for a while. I didn't meet him there, but you know what I mean. This great group of creative guys and everything. Anyway, I was at a Heroes Con. I'll have to swing back and tell you Mike Wieringo's story, another Mike Wieringo story. So at a Heroes Con, I asked Mike Wieringo, like, will you give me a portfolio review? Will you mind and everything? And Mike was the sweetest guy, man. He was like going through, Kelly, this looks great. I'll do this. This looks great. This is fan. Maybe work on this. He was just so nice and sweet, just as everybody remembers Mike was. Chuck Vojkovic. And you want a real portfolio review? I'm like, well, yeah. And he tore me up one side down the other, and not in a mean. I don't mean to say that was mean. He was the most constructive. Like, if you want to do this and be serious about it, this is where you got to do. This looks bad, and he explained why it looked bad. He would. I say much in my head. It was much more like, you're terrible. It wasn't like that, but he was actually very constructive, very straightforward. It really helped inform a lot of my, what I need to be more serious about this if I'm going to do it. So it was really, so it was a great, my first portfolio was Mike Wieringo, but it was great to have them. So,
well, the thing the thing about Chuck is that if Chuck recognized that if you were like semi-serious to serious, he was going to offer you his opinion versus just make you feel good for showing up or being gutsy enough to share your work. I would assume Dave probably is very similar in that respect. Dave was very, very astute, in picking things up, but Chuck super sharp like that.
Yeah. I appreciate it. I mean, it helped me. So there was that. And, I was getting little things. I think I got these little breakthrough. Like I get a pin up a little bit bigger pin up. I'll get a pin up for DC. It's just this slow little process. But I was never really landing anything big with stuff. I did DC. Actually, I did finally get a call from DC Comics. This was all pre-internet, right? This was all, on my voicemail at home from Ivan Cohen. He's the editor at DC for years.
Oh, wow. I forgot that name. Yeah. Okay.
He's writing stuff actually for DC. He's still involved in everything. And I know he was writing, like, I think Scooby-Doo and some of those books. So it's really great to see him do stuff as well. I just used to love running into him at New York Comic Con or San Diego. And he's a great guy. I really like him. And I appreciate that he gave me an opportunity, but I was able to do 2 stories for him for DC Secret Files. That was really kind of I did a Chase and a Green Arrow story and everything. And that was really kind of my first, like, really full sequential storytelling and, like, with deadlines. Like, so right. Not the best I could have done, but the best I could have done with the time that I had. So it was a really great experience to have that for sure. So,
well, so that's important. It's really important to dig into that kind of stuff because these are the real heavy inflection points. Like when we get our chances, our shots, whatever the thing we want to call it.
Yeah.
And how do we embrace it? How do we get through it? And then how do we reflect on it? Because like those kinds of things, because there's people who get the shot and they tighten up and they have a hard time. Sometimes they don't even get through it, and then there are the people who struggle to get through it, or they pull all-nighters because it's more than they could conceive of, or whatever the thing is. And then some people will reflect back on it as a terrible ordeal because it wasn't this magical experience that they anticipated. So, and I'm focusing on negative things. I mean, you could also just shine yourself off and say, it was great and I was amazing,
No, I don't think I've ever, anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. No, did you, so, I mean, when the call comes and the script gets, I guess, faxed to you or mailed to you.
Yeah. I think it was faxed. Oh my gosh. Yeah. I think I had a fax machine at the time. Yeah. I mean, it was exhilarating. I mean, it's that whole ball of everything, like exhilarating, nervous, anxiety, but excitement. It was just this whole my opportunity, and you know, you know, I wouldn't say I hit it out of the park, but I think I did pretty good.
Yeah.
The fact that they gave me a chance, it didn't catch. So, I mean, that'll lead into some other stuff with how all this kind of developed. But yeah, so I'd get these little things, but nothing in jail where I could like jump over and start working full time in comic books.
Mm-hmm.
That's the trick,
Right.
and people who do it full time, I'm amazed by. Good for them. I mean,
yeah,
great. It's hard. It really is hard. So
super hard.
But I think I can't remember. I think I got a couple of little small assignments here and there every once in a while. Some Wildstorm trading cards, or whatever. $200 here, $100 there. Again, not enough to make a living off of. Not enough to piece it together. I will actually jump back to that Mike Ringo story, kind of pre-internet, pre-email. So I met Mike a couple times. He liked me and everything. He had this Street Fighter 8-page Street Fighter assignment come in, and he didn't have time to finish it, but he wanted to collaborate with me.
Oh, wow.
He wanted to collaborate. He goes, so he put a call into the guys at the studio looking for me because he wanted to do the layouts and I would do the finished pencils on it and everything. And so whatever, nobody can touch me. Again, I didn't have no cell phone, no pager, no nothing. And I finally call him back and goes, oh, hey, you missed it by about 12, 18 hours or whatever. We had to turn the job down like, I know, but I think for me, actually, that felt like a little low point because I felt like I missed my opportunity.
Yeah.
I felt like that's it. That was my opportunity. I've lost it, but yeah, but that was.
How did so? I mean, when you went to conventions, I mean, Heroes is an amazing comic book convention, but it's not an industry convention. It's a convention where the creators are celebrated and comic books are celebrated. But like a San Diego or a New York, this is where the industry shows up and the editors are there and they're like doing their job, which is to, be talent scouts.
Mm-hmm.
Did you go up to New York? Was that part of the thought process, or did you just keep sort of firing from, Greensboro?
So, well, yeah, New York, I can't remember how it all went down, but remember there was this period when New York Comic Con did not happen. So, right. I mean, because I remember I did when the Repop, whatever it was before it was Repop owned, whatever, the current New York Comic Con. I was there the first 3 years, nightmare and everything that it was of people getting locked out and literally shoulder to shoulder. So that was like a little bit after the time I was actually trying to break in per se. Yep. So I was going to San Diego. I remember my first San Diego was 1996. And Randy Green and I traveled out there together. I had my little portfolio and went out there. Randy had been out there in case Randy Green, but listening, like Randy was drawing like Witchblade and White Queen from Marvel and Cable. I mean, Randy's had this, and what else? Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I mean, he was top tier guys. I mean, he's top tier guy, you know what I mean? And so, but I remember going out there and trying to kind of break in, and, I'd get these little things, and the elusive unicorn in my life has been Star Wars. I've had tons of work on Doctor Who. I want to keep working on Doctor Who, but I've always wanted to do something for Star Wars, cover something. I still haven't gotten it yet. Maybe I never will. And, we'll see. But I remember I was talking, Dark Horse had the license to it. And I showed I'd done some Obi-Wan pages, like Obi-Wan fighting sand people outside his home and everything, like 3 pages. And I think the editor, Pete James, was there. And he goes, Kelly, I love it. He goes, you're this close. You're this close. I'm like, So I've just had these. So that was kind of my thing. I mean, I also pitched somewhere along, not that same year, a couple years later, I pitched a Lady Vader book to Randy Stradley. Okay. He loved it. He goes, those characters won't sell though, which at that time he had a very good point. But now at Marvel, there's like 10 Marvel books a month.
Sure.
I would love to do a Lady Vader miniseries or something. That would be like pretty cool. I think we'd do some fun stuff. But So I've had these things. Um, yeah, I remember standing in portfolio lines, and then sometimes you win lotteries to go stand in portfolio lines. Now they've got a little bit more streamlined up there in the sales pavilion at San Diego, where you can kind of go and get your name on a list, and you can go stand and wait. So it's definitely it's set up more. But yeah, so for me, 99% of my comic book work came from going to San Diego Comic-Con and meeting the right people at the right time.
Yeah.
So being there, I mean, they can find you now online, but still there is something about meeting somebody, actually meeting somebody, have a connection, go have dinner with them.
Yep.
Have a conversation with them, be human with them,
Yes.
And kind of my philosophy has been too, is I'd rather do less work, but do the work I want to do and better work than a bunch of crap work.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. And I mean, listen, I'm not breaking into the business. I'm not young. So my point of view is completely, not in that moment, but I still believe that if you make yourself a person to the people who are the ones who are producing these, products that we want to be a part of, you stand a greater chance of success if you can engage with these people as human beings, because you can kind of look into someone's face and go like, hey, you're not even there, are you? I don't know if I want to trust you with, part of my career. And it's super important to be engaging and to be present and to be a part of something, because I mean, most everyone is a fan of comic books who is in comic books.
Right.
So that part, we got that part all checked. Everyone's on board with that one.
I still go like every Wednesday or Thursday to get my books. I love it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny when I left the business as my full-time thing to do, and I went into design, it was weird that the hobby of going to the comic book store kind of disappeared for me. And I've such a hard time being regular in going to the shop. And so it's a tough thing. But when I go, it's usually a devastating blow to my bank account, because I'm like, oh, this looks good and that looks good. And I come home, and I'm also like one of those readers who read something and then I get rid of it because I don't keep it. I go, okay, that was great. And then I walk back. I've just walked back in the shop and I just plop it on the counter. I go, that was great. Thanks.
So you should go to the library.
All right, Kelly, go this moving forward. I'm going to go to the library. I appreciate your social ethics.
I love actually going. I go to the library all the time as well, and I love seeing comic books, graphic novels, all over the library. Stuff I've never seen. I'm like, oh wow, I would have never seen that in the shop or never picked it up. I just love now this love for that the medium there in the libraries. It's amazing.
Well, we were saying how the variety of stuff being produced. I mean, this is a time when we are actually able to read more literary works in the comic book form than ever before.
Yeah.
So it's kind of cool. So yeah, libraries and educators are embracing the medium.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean, my I struggled too, man. The 90s were a struggle for me with the comic book thing. It was always a lot of like, near misses or false starts. You're like, okay, cool, we're up and running. And then it's like, oh, this isn't happening. And you go, oh, what? Like you had something and then it just disappears.
Yeah. That seems to happen a lot in our industry though.
Oh yeah.
You go through the back bins of look at things like, oh my gosh, I forgot about this book. Oh, I forgot about these creators. I forgot about whatever. You know what I mean? It's just unfortunate that
it's super tough.
Yeah,
it's super tough. And there's a lot of lessons that took me a long time to catch on to. Like I didn't realize they were lessons until many years later. And it's these things where you can carve your own path if you pay attention and you do the hard work to do that. So you can write your own comic book. You don't have to walk around hoping that someone else will say, "Hey, would you draw this thing for me?"
Yeah.
Or a publisher. You can go to a publisher and say, "Hey, here's my idea. I want to draw this, by the way." And they go, "Ooh, it's a good idea. Okay, you can draw this." But they're never going to do that just out of the blue.
No, you do have to have a little bit of name recognition to some degree, or the proof in your talent, when you open your portfolio or whatever. But then again, Kickstarter, I don't know. Maybe that's the route to go. I don't think it's the be all end all, but I definitely think it's a piece of the future and the dynamics of distribution for sure.
Yeah.
But, to kind of jump on what you're saying, like, so for me, continuing the theme of San Diego and getting work and everything, I was getting frustrated because I wasn't breaking in. I wanted to break in. I was like, I was doing sample pages all the time for, Buffy and this and that and Superboy. Well, I was doing sample pages all the time and getting close with this and close to that. And, I was actually just sidetracking. I was actually supposed to be one of the original pencilers on Firefly.
Oh, wow.
Name Firefly. And it was just called Cowgirls in Space was how it was kind of described. I had to do a couple pinups based off Cowgirls in Space and aliens, type of thing. And then I got close with Buffy, and I was actually supposed to take over on Fray number 7 and 8 over for Karl Malone, because I think there were some weird things with the scheduling with him and Joss, and some weird things going on. I think they were trying to get me to take over 7 and 8, and Josh had spoken up and said, "No, I want to stick with Karl." So I'm glad he did. I mean, a little bit of a point like, missed it, but again, missed opportunity, but it was the right thing to do. So I'm not upset or anything like that, but that's really cool. But I was getting so frustrated because of these near misses, or I wasn't getting a call from Marvel or DC anymore. I was like, I kind of want to do my own thing. So Image Comics was kind of, where, with the whole history of Image Comics, and I was kind of interested in, like, I said, well, maybe I can do this. Maybe I can write and draw my own thing and figure this out. And, I started kind of messing around with this thing, and I've always liked Star Wars, Flash Gordon, all those things. And I saw some pictures of girls with jetpacks, and I was like, so this whole kind of thing started coming together. It wasn't called Amber Atoms at the time, but just started kind of coming up, was like, I think I can do this. I think I could come up with this idea. So I really started working it out, doing layouts and writing the stuff. And I spent a lot of time on the story, just making sure I had a good story at the end of the day. So I started kind of pulling all that together, started kind of pitching around. I'd actually made a pitch to writers at first. I put this thing together, like a book, and I went to Mark Waid and asked him to help write. But Brian K. Vaughan, I feel like there was somebody else I went to, I can't remember off the top of my head, because I didn't have the confidence as a writer and everything. But at that point, it's like, I got to write it myself because, so that's kind of where this all kind of started to come together and everything. And I started pitching it to a couple people, Dark Horse, Image Comics. I was talking with Jim Valentino. I think there's a little changeover at the time. Then Eric Stevenson had taken over. And we had some tweaks and changes, but they liked it, and they were very interested in it. And they actually put a full page ad and previews for it when they finally said, we're going to do this. I'm like, oh my gosh, contracts are signed. I got my own book coming out through Image Comics. You're excited, like daunting as crap. I'd never put out a book.
Right.
Daunting. That's me always. Anyway, but that was kind of where I got. And so there was a lot of energy. Where I got sidetracked was solicited in December of 2008 to come out in February 2009. It did not come out at a more worse time in history.
Yeah.
Or COVID, because the Great Recession was beginning. We were shedding 250,000 jobs a week. I mean, the economy we were shedding. I mean, and they were, me too. I lost 2 jobs in 2008.
Yeah, I lost my job on my birthday in 2008.
Oh my gosh.
And it was great to sit there in the room with the HR people and have them not even realize that it was my birthday, that they were asking, and and then they called me, and I went to go sit in my exact same seat and desk, I think 3 or 4 months later, because the person who they had sitting there had a meltdown and ran out the door.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I could see that. I could see things like that. Oh man. Yeah. It was a tough time. I mean, Yeah.
They
Sorry.
so they no no so they so the solicitation was pulled.
No. So when I was talking with Eric Stevenson at the time, I think they were estimating that it's kind of, I want to say somewhere around 18,000 copies is what they were thinking, which is really good for an independent book.
Yeah.
Even their Image at the time, they were like, we're thinking around 18,000. And, and then again, the recession hit. I mean, Spider-Man's, if I remember correctly, the time, Spider-Man orders were even dropping from like 1 million down to 250,000 copies. Like shops could not, where are we going with this? The economy's going to crash. So I think my orders came in around 6,000, something like that, and everything. So no, it came out. I got 4 issues out, and I was going to go. I had an issue 5 done, but the Image decided not to. It was again that whole diamond thing, like the threshold. It was getting a little too low for the threshold. So I was definitely, that was my shot. I took my shot. Yeah, I tried, and I did it. I absolutely did it. But then again, I got laid off. So my comic book kind of failed. I got laid off twice in 2008, both of my two jobs. We were probably a couple of months from losing our house.
Yep.
So it's just at that point, like just getting a job to survive. I just had a baby. So just trying to survive. So, comic books had to kind of be put on the side burner for a little bit in that sense and everything. So that was a low time, both across the board.
Yeah.
So,
well, let's just jump into the part where before that, because, being handed the keys to a series is a big responsibility, and you're also writing and drawing the series. So this is not just sort of one task. You have to do multiple things. And how did you envision, like, okay, how am I going to get this done? Because it's bigger than anything you've done up to this point, I'm assuming.
Oh, absolutely. Well, I was thinking that I always thought that I could do a transition, because even Image at the time was even open to bi-monthly series. Like, so you could, if I get 6 issues out a year. So that was kind of my thinking. I was like, if I can write it in 2 weeks and then have 6 weeks to illustrate it and kind of, tag team back and forth a little bit, like, switch, that's kind of my approach. I was like, well, maybe this will be my opportunity to leave the full-time corporate world and do creative work.
Right.
And everything. And, yeah, it was just that's where it kind of fell through. I tried and, I took my shot. It's not that I failed. I didn't fail. No. That was one of those things. It was just like the economy was just so screwed up and so wacky then. But, I put a book out. I mean, how many people say they put a book out or series, So, I mean.
Not many.
Right.
Yeah. Not many. And rarely do they, write it and draw it themselves. Rarely is it done with a, top 3 publisher. Like, I mean, it is not, I mean, these are all sort of significant elements. What was like, what did you learn in your process in those 5 issues that you sort of took away of, like, hey, I need to do X, Y, and Z differently in the future, or I like what I did here?
Well, I always thought the Amber Atoms needed a little bit more of a chance. That's why I'm doing the Kickstarter, actually, is to kind of get a trade paperback, because it was never collected into a trade paperback. And, people have told me how much they enjoyed the story. And I think I've always considered myself an illustrator first, writer kind of second or third, but it was always important to me to have a good story. I might not be a perfect writer, but I did enjoy the process of trying to piece the puzzle together. Like, okay, here's the beginning of the story. Here's the end of the story. Okay, well, how do I weave it together? So it's like a puzzle as a human trying to figure out that puzzle. So I really, I wouldn't say I would write a novel or anything, but I definitely like the writing experience, kind of piecing it together. Like, okay, well, that works there. This doesn't. So I think I grew a lot as that. And, it gave me enough confidence to feel like I could pitch a Lady Death Vader to Lady Vader series to Dark Horse or things like that. I don't think I want to be a full-time writer. Like, I would, if Marvel said, hey, we want you to write a ongoing Star Wars book, I'm like, nah, I love the idea of that, but let's call time out, because that's not,
Well, okay, so let's talk a little bit about the writing. Because that's what I think about every single day of my life is writing. So it's always good to talk about it. So you're saying you had this, okay, cool. You had an idea for a story, you saw pictures of jetpacks and you're like, you're sort of kind of piecing these things together. And I remember doing that, when I was a comic book artist, because I too had this terrified lack of confidence about the idea of writing something. It was just like, there was no way I would ever say, oh yeah, I could write that. I couldn't. But it's an interesting way that artists typically build stories. They find a visual, or they do a drawing, and this drawing sort of inspires something within them, and then they start kind of building a visual and potentially word-based kind of gallery in their in their sketchbooks, and they start kind of putting these pieces together and connecting a story sort of loosely within this framework. Like, what were you drawing upon for your benchmarks for writing, having not really done it, I guess, except for making sample pages?
Well, so I think me again is just figuring out the beginning and the end. Really, was figuring out what story, how did the story end? Like, right. I actually tried to kind of figure out, because that way that helped. That gave me my North Star. That gave me the way to weave the story, like it. And right or wrong, it's like, this is the direction I need to go in. Maybe that limits me, versus going off on a tangent or whatever. But I felt like it helped me weave scenes together. And just to jump ahead a little bit, I've done another creator-owned book that I'm probably about 2/3 of the way through. But at this point, I'm writing it. I've already written the whole thing. It's all written. Like, it was because I want the stories to be. I don't want. I know comic books are cheap entertainment, but I do want them. I want to be a good story. Right. I want people to be entertained with what I'm telling or whatever I'm trying to get just entertain them, get a point across, whatever. So the beginning and the end points are important, and then just figuring out how they weave together. That's the important thing. So for me.
Well, it's not uncommon. The idea of having the end of the story, having your finale, at least not completely fleshed out, but knowing where you want to go is super important. And because you can weave and meander, but the thing is that weaving and meandering makes it it requires a lot more editing to be able to, oh wow, I just wrote 14 comic books worth of story here, but I only get 6 issues. So now you have to figure out how to sort of tighten that back into something that you can work.
Which isn't a bad thing sometimes.
No.
You might have to reflect, like, okay, save this for another thing or another book, or just. And what I found with my writing is I will say one of the guideposts for my writing is like, I love the old Flash Gordon serialized things where it's cliffhangers. So that's what I started doing. Like, everything had to end, and comic books too. The old comic books I grew up on, like the New Mutants and the X-Men or whatever, ends on a cliffhanger. Totally. So that's kind of my one little guidepost. So that kind of helped me write towards certain scenes at certain times. I think it served me pretty well and everything, like, because it piques interest in picking up the next book. So,
yeah. And I think that comic books are so very similar to those serialized pieces. They're not too long, and they do have that sort of cliffhanger aspect you're talking about. Like, you really do want to hook the person, and and they're built with cliffhangers because the page turn can be designed as a mini cliffhanger to keep that level of speed going. If you want them to go fast, if you don't want them to go fast, you can slow them down, in layout or in word.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. I found that my writing style is fast. Like, at least at this point in my career, like, I write out all the stuff I don't need and just boil it down to the important stuff.
Right. Yeah.
Just like, I don't need all this extra fluff. I just need to get to the point, like, boom, 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 boom. So
it's funny. And I had, have a friend of mine who's a writer, and she, in reading my book months later, she goes, I figured out what it is. You write novels like comic books. Like there's this sort of like visual aspect of the way you write, but the way you move the story along is very similar to how at least she envisions a comic book, being written. So I'm like, oh, well, that makes sense, with my background. And, I've ingested more comic books than I've ingested probably anything else.
Good, healthy diet, right?
Yeah, right. Lots of fiber. So like right now you have another project that you've written completely out. So you've sat at the keyboard, you've done the notes, and you've written the script. How did your process go for putting that script together? Because I'm really interested in especially how artists move into writing. It's a very interesting world for me.
Well, so it's morphing and changing, and technology has changed it too. Just all the digital stuff now, and like I use it. Well, gosh, let me think about how this unfolds. So this other book is called Monster, Mother, Monster.
Okay.
And I say like the initial kind of thought was like, oh, Nightmare Before Christmas. And then it completely shifted and morphed into a completely different way. And it's kind of like a halfway house for monsters. So people get turned into monsters, and this family lives, and they try to help these people revert back into humans from being monsters. So it's kind of like a halfway house for monsters is the general idea with this. But there's a theme around it, forgiveness, things like that. But I think with this one, I really just typing stuff out. Like literally, I would start breaking out the scene. Like I'd write like 2 or 3 sentences, like a quote paragraph. Like this is what I want to happen over these 5 pages. And sometimes it'd be a blend of actually just thumbnailing out, sketching out, like, oh, a monster hitting somebody. Oh, somebody talking. Mm-hmm. So really kind of a combination of, just back and forth of like writing. And then I found out, well, maybe I need to write out a little bit more towards my North Star, my end point. And then I'd come back and do thumbnails out. Now I find when I use this program, Clip Studio Paint.
Yeah, sure.
So I use that. So now I'll take my scripts that I originally wrote and I'll rewrite it. Like I'll do so if I have my thumbnails on a layer, I'll do another layer, like just Greeking out the word balloons. Like, oh, the word balloons go here. And then I'll find I'm actually writing new script or moving dialogue around. And that's such a great editing process. You can do it right there. Like, oh, well, this will flow better if I actually move this balloon here versus how I originally wrote it. So there is that fluidness to be able to do that. But I still have the framework, the blueprints of the story of where I'm taking it. So it doesn't really derail me. It's just like visually it works a little bit better this way.
Yeah. And that's cool. I like that. So, I mean, how many issues is this planned to be? Just so I can.
So, well, again, there. I think an issue or two issues. So when Comixology first launched, they were trying to push not everybody, some people to do more of this horizontal format and try to get out. So I originally kind of did it a little bit more like that, and I got two 11 chapter stories out of it, and then I kind of paused. I was like, this is not. I want to kind of get it back to how I want it to a pure comic book, double stacked pages. Maybe I'll publish it. Again, this has been over the past couple of years. Well, now we've gotten Kickstarter. And right. So I think how I really want to start doing projects now, and this is at this point, I really want to do just like graphic novel trade paperbacks, a complete story where it's a complete, I think I have it at 88 pages, maybe a little bit more, maybe less. Again, that's the great thing. You can edit along the way. But what I'm finding is I just want to tell tighter stories. So I want to wait till it's kind of like all done and then kind of circle back and go back and re-edit and tighten things up along the way.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think I'm going to kind of do this more story oriented, like 88 pages. Here's a graphic novel. Here's a graphic novel. Here's a graphic novel. So
I'm a huge fan of that. I think a few years ago, I was really kind of asking the question, like, where are the beginning, middle, and end isolated single stories, not a collected edition, but like something that like was intentionally done with no breaks. Like this is one story. And it feels like we're getting a lot more of those. And I think that might be a reflection of the middle grade and YA market of graphic novels that has exploded
Yeah. Yeah. I, I absolutely agree. I'm just trying to think of what I have on the shelf that's just, yeah, you're seeing more of that. And I think you're right about that. I don't know if I got anything to get my hands on at the moment, but I've definitely seen that a lot more where it's just kind of one complete story without breaks.
Yeah.
You put your little bookmark in where you stop, just like a novel. You know what I mean? You're like, oh,
Yeah.
stop right here. You know?
I just read Van Jensen and Jesse Lonergan's Arca, which comes out I think in June or July.
Okay.
And it's a single story and it's phenomenal. It's this great science fiction story. And it's not issues, it's just one thing and it's wonderful. I mean, it's just great.
Well, that's kind of what I'm thinking with Amber Adams when I get to like the second thing. I mean, I want to continue the story a little bit, but also like I want to kind of maybe keep it more self-contained. Like here's a new adventure of Amber Adams.
Well, it's like a book. You know, I mean, it's just a book series. You know, you're just telling another novel of James Bond or insert the protagonist. You know, Amber Adams, and I think that's I think that's fine. Yeah, I mean, like, well, what it's like what you know, Brubaker and Phillips do. I mean, they put out books.
Yes, they do. They put out some great stuff too.
Yeah, you know, and I think it's fan. And look, once again, you know, circling back, we can love superheroes. That's fine. I mean, Spider-Man is still my all-time favorite character for a million reasons, and I love all the comic books that I love, but it's also very cool that we get books now that are comics.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing to see all the different content out there. I mean, things when I walk into comic stores, like, how have I never heard of this book? Why have I never heard of this book? I'm just so, you know, and it's always kind of neat to be able to walk in and be surprised by something like, I didn't know about these creators. Like, why have I not seen this? Like, why is that? And I think that's a great thing, you know, because it used to be like, you know, when, let's say like Joe Madureira was coming along or Jim Lee or whatever, you know, they would get a pinup in the back of a book, get another pinup. Oh, maybe they'll get a short story. Oh, maybe they'll get a fill-in issue. Let's give them a couple of fill-in issues on different books through the years. Oh, let's give them a mini series and everything. And then all of a sudden they get put on like a big book, like an X-Men or a Spider-Man. And it was just, you could tell it was almost like a cycle, like a 3-year cycle. You could see this building of both their art style and the fan base and everything. So it was constructed different. I don't think it was done on purpose. I just think that's how it kind of went. And so
sure.
Had these people like the John Burns and people like that who had these huge following they built up over years. And now you walk into the comic book store and you find something you've never, you're amazed by somebody you've never seen or seen their product before. And it's just like, wow, where were these people? Where have they been? You know?
Yeah. Well, and you know, we were saying so earlier that there's so much out there that it is hard to even spot, you know, where that person got that pinup, you know, because that pinup could have happened in something that is so far off your sort of zone of interest. And then they ended up doing that, you know, backup story or whatever for somebody in another thing. And you didn't get to see that either. And then next thing you know, wham, they're doing the thing. And you're like, what is this? You know?
Yeah.
No, it's kind of cool. I mean, you know, it's a different way of building mystery. You know, like we had mystery before the internet because we didn't know, but there was such a small avenue for things to be distributed that you could kind of keep an eye on most everything. But now it's this magical sort of you didn't know about this? Like, oh, there's this publisher, like, you know, talking, you know, with Mark Irwin.
Oh, you know, that's right. Yeah. You talking Mark Irwin, right?
Yeah. And he's talking about, like, you know, getting this gig with Mad Cave, and he's got this phenomenal, you know, position, and he's loving what he's doing. And he's like, I never knew who they were before they called me. Because there's so much.
There's so many. Well, yeah, you know, and actually Mark, he's the guy who gave me a lot of work for like trading cards over the years.
Hell yeah, he did.
Stuff, Gen 13, things like that, those little ones. So yeah, Mark's a great guy. So I'm very appreciative for everything that he you know, he would send my way for sure.
Yeah. No, it's cool. Well, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, what just kind of talking about like different publishers and all this. So, I found some of my favorite artists internationally and everything. And it's really opened me up to some of the other international books that we've never had access to before, because there's one of my favorite artists is a guy named Olivier Vatine, French artist.
Oh, yeah.
And so I've known Olivier since like 1999. So what had happened is I was flipping through, I think it was like Fan Magazine or something at the time, whatever, Fan Overstreet, whichever one it was. They used to do the magazine, the previews and new books come out. And I knew, again, I was a big Star Wars guy. I was getting all the Dark Horse stuff. And I'd read the Heir to the Empire trilogy stuff by Timothy Zahn. So I read the novels. And Dark Horse was doing an adaptation, and they had a preview in Fan Magazine of this artwork. And I was like, and I've seen, I loved Art Adams, Mark Schultz, Al Williamson, the list goes on. All those guys loved them. But I saw Olivier stuff. I was like, I really love this stuff. I was like, oh my gosh, where's this guy been? Like who? So I started asking like the Artemis guys, like Rich Case and Ringo. I'm like, who is this guy? Whatever. Like, oh yeah, like he's a French artist, we think. And I'd go to the comic book store and like, I think he'd done like Dark Horse had reprinted like a short story from, was it Cheval Noir book that they had or whatever? Like,
oh my God.
Yeah, right. He done this. This is all pre-internet. Right? So I'm like I'm going like, oh, okay. I found this story, and like you had to talk to people to figure out things. And like, oh, he might have done Aqua Blue too. I'm like, well, what's Aqua Blue? I've never heard of it. Again, I can't go to the internet to search,
Right.
And so I'm trying to piece this together. I really like this guy's stuff. Well, then like I think around the time the book actually came out, I fell in love with the guy's stuff. I'm just like, whatever it was, I just love his artwork. And finally, again, because of my connections at Dark Horse, trying to get into the books, I was like, if I write a fan letter to this guy, will you guys send it to him? Like, do you mind doing that? And they're like, yeah, write a fan letter. We'll send it to him. I'm like, all right, great. This was like 98, 99.
Yeah.
I'm living in Detroit at the time. And I come like, I don't know, I want to say like 8-9 months had gone by from when I sent the letter. And I come home from work and there's this box on my front step from France. I'm like, hell, who do I know from France? Like, what is this? And Olivier had sent me this box of like all these albums and all these prints and all this stuff. And I'm like, oh my gosh. I mean, I just love it. It's like all this stuff and everything. And this was all about the time, like, so I think I'd written him a letter or two back. And right about this time, technology, so emails started coming through and everything. Sure. So he sent me his email address, and we just kind of had been pen pals back and forth. And I would send him some things, just little things here and there. And we just kind of built this relationship. And actually, he asked me to work with him on a French book. So I did like an 8-page French story for Carmen and Travis with him. Like he did the layouts and I did all the pencils and inks and colors and everything. Wow. So, but yeah, and we went to France, and my wife and I stayed with him and his family for a little bit. And, so we've been friends like since 99. Like whenever he came to New York, I'd take him around New York City and everything. Mm-hmm. He actually did a variant cover for my Amber Adams Kickstarter.
That's right. Look at you tying it back in.
Yeah. So I've known Olivier for all these years, and I've loved his artwork, and I love seeing the success of what he's done over the years, and just kind of, so yeah, wherever conventions we'll hang out, and just such a great guy. Love his artwork.
Yeah, he was at Heroes this year, right? It was last year.
He was not. I don't think he has not done Heroes. He's done like New York Comic Con.
New York.
He was up for an Eisner at San Diego pre-COVID for New York. So Dark Horse that he wrote and illustrated. He adapted and illustrated it. But yeah, I think he should have won, but that's just me.
You might be biased, right?
Maybe a little bit, but
a little bit. Yeah, no, he's totally amazing. But yeah, I mean, I guess that is sort of, but now there are, not saying there's a ton of him, but our access to the breadth of these artists out there is kind of unlimited.
Well, I think he helped expose me to the whole European market of comics I never knew about. Like I'm
sure.
stuff. I'm like, like Fred Blanchard and Claire Wendling and Didier Gillespie, and I'm like all these amazing artists that are incredible. And it's like, how have I never seen this? Why have we not seen this? And you're right. Now we have.
She's the best. Claire Wendling is the best, man. I will push her books onto anybody who shows an inkling of interest, like artistically in that avenue. I'm like, you got to get those books.
Yeah. She's great and everything. So yeah, I got to meet her at Thought Bubble in Leeds. I don't know, about 5 years ago or something. So
sweet,
fantastic. Yeah.
I'm
a big fan of the French illustrators. What can I say?
Hey man, c'est la vie. Gotta love it. You gotta love it. Okay, so Amber Adams.
Yes.
Kickstarter.
Yes.
You launched it last week?
It was Friday at noon.
Yeah. And you're in week 1, which is the heavy work week.
Yes. I'm learning all this.
And then you go into what I have deemed the trench.
Yes.
Which is the world has forgotten about you and you are terrified. And then everything picks up magically at the end in the last week.
Yes, I'm familiar with this cycle now. I'm learning about the cycle. That was part of my prepping for all this.
Yeah. So how was the launch for you? Like, what did you feel? And how do you feel?
Do you want me to tell you how confident and great I was feeling about just hitting that button? And is that what you want to hear? Or
I don't believe that for a second.
You want to hear the terrifying truth? Not terrifying. It was not terrifying. It is.
Yeah.
I'd come up with my game plan and my path and my blueprint for what I was going to do. So I felt confident, but we were asking people for $5,000. That's my goal I've set, like to print these books, to do this, $5,000. But it's still nerve wracking. I don't care how much you prep for it. Like, it's just like you're getting ready to give a speech in front of 1,000 people. You're still going to get butterflies, no matter how hidden you are behind a computer. But it's been thrilling. And I got to say, again, building up that subscriber list and just family and friends and people I've met at shows before. They might not be my best friend, but just that community of people who want to support creators. I've done so many shows over the years. I couldn't do it without them. There's no way I could do it without them. And I think my first day I got over $2,000.
Oh my God. Wow.
And I'm sitting here and it kept going up. And then it went up over Saturday. Sunday, it hit a little bit of a level out and everything. Mm-hmm. So I posted, we're sitting on Monday morning, February 20th. I posted my videos. And before we got on our call, I am now sitting at $4,600. I am $400 away from funding my first Kickstarter.
God damn.
And I'm pretty excited. I mean,
wow.
Thank you.
No, that's a fantastic opener. Yeah. Okay. So do you know roughly how many pledgers that works out to be?
So let's see. I think when I checked, I think I'm like 70, 76, 78, something like that. And there's been people who have donated a couple bucks here and there, like, here's $20 just because we like you, Kelly, or whatever. Mm-hmm. Even if it's $1, I'm like, thank you very much. But I think, again, coming with the blueprint with this comics launch group is really helped me. Like, I had some issues like, well, I have this cover. What do I do with this? Like, well, maybe you should make that a variant cover and make it exclusive. So figuring out all your tiers and what are things that are going to really accelerate you. And I know I'm going to learn stuff out of this process when I do the next Kickstarter. Like I can, those things I've learned, I can apply to it there. But, offering the cover, I don't sell much of my original artwork, but I offered the cover to the trade paperback, I think for $900. And somebody purchased it over the weekend.
Oh, wow.
And that really, I know is high, but also I'm trying to fund a book. You know what I mean? And
totally.
And somebody backed me, they purchased it. So that jumped me up to there. But getting those things figured out, I got a couple commissions I'm going to do as well. But, you want to find a balance. Like you want to do some of the commissions, but you want to take on too much where you get behind on everything. Yeah. So I limited it to like 3, and then I got some headshots I'll do. So nothing crazy work wise. But just figuring all that stuff out. And I'm excited. I'm very humbled I'm humbled that people have contributed and they're excited to back me. And like, like I said, I'm going to take, if there's extra money, that's all going to go to creative cross costs for the next project.
Sure. Well, I mean, the dream is that you can sort of pre-load towards the next project, and you can just kind of keep building and overlapping and, build an audience. Two questions that came up to mind. One, does the person who bought the cover get a copy of the comic, or is it they have to do that as well, extra?
I'm actually giving them a copy of the comic. So
okay, that seems very, very benevolent of you.
And, actually, I'll make it a little bit. I'm going to do like a one-off print, a color version of it, sign it, and make it like a one-of-one copy, so they get the original art and a color copy of the cover, like a
that's cool
artist proof print type of thing.
Sure,
so just a little bit extra something for them.
I like that. And the other thing is, I mean, you're within 1 week here, but have you had to, call an audible on your blueprint so far?
No, not at this point. Not at this point. There's somebody who tried to. Well, there's the little technical things. Like somebody wanted to purchase they purchased a commission that does come with the book, but they also wanted to get the variant cover of Olivier, and for whatever reason, they couldn't select two things. You can only select one, and I didn't have it set up as a tier. So, but I know the guy, and he's. So I might just give him a copy of that extra book, right. But it's the little technical things. And like I said, I really try to kind of keep this thing small. I try not to go crazy with super things. Like I did offer a shirt if you want to get an Amber Adams shirt and everything, but I really try to keep it small in a way that I could, because it's just me at this point. Like next time, maybe I'll use because I'm going to do all the fulfillment my own this first time, just so I can understand it and everything. Maybe next time I'll use somebody different depending on how it goes. But yeah, so just kind of learning as I go.
I'm a big fan of BackerKit, which seems to be very helpful when it comes to collecting the information from the people, from your what are they called again? Not donors, they're pledgers. There you go. Yeah. So BackerKit seems to be a great way to collect that information. And I believe they can also sort of flesh out their order. Like if they've changed their mind and they want to add a couple more issues or whatever, they can do that in BackerKit, I think.
Yeah, BackerKit really seems like a great way to go. Again, with this first one, I didn't think I'd be sitting here almost funded within 3 days, right? You know what I mean? Yeah. I'm just flabbergasted. So, and like I said, I did enough research where I feel like I can handle. Now, if I get 500 people, not that, but yeah, 500, I might have to I might need to loop in BackerKit at this point. But for this first one, I just want to kind of keep it small. And then next time, kind of figure out, because you got to figure out your pricing and everything. It's not just, that's the whole thing. You're being a businessman too. Not even on
it's so much work. Figuring the tiers out and all the pricing and, rolling in all your shipping and handling, like all these things. It's a lot of work.
It really is. It really is. Well, and like you're saying though, is hopefully you build up enough of an audience, supporters that, when I do the second one, like it'll be bigger, be a step up, and then like, okay, well, I can't handle that anymore. I'm okay with delegating or outsourcing, whatever. But for this first one, I just want to get it under my belt and, get my hands all, just so I know what's going on and understand the process.
So here's an interesting thing that's been sort of tinkering in my head for a while about I'm just going to use the term Kickstarter comic books, is that with this sort of printing on demand world that we have, we don't seem to have the collectability of comic books has sort of been, I don't want to say ignored, but has been overlooked. And what I mean by that is you do a Kickstarter and it's successful, and then you go and you do your next one. And in your next one, you may offer, hey, you could order a trade of the Amber Adams thing, add that onto your thing. What a nice piece of, that's great. But those books will be printed separately for that purpose. Now, I'm just thinking more in the terms that these are individual issues, but one of the things about collecting comics is that, hey, this is printed like that Crystar cover with Nightcrawler, done by Michael Golden,
Yep.
in 1984. That's the first printing, and that first printing has value because it's first printing. And with this digital printing, we're not putting in the indicia, it seems, first printing, second printing, third printing, whatever. It would be nice if we would start as a community to incorporate that in there so the collecting market can know what they're purchasing.
Yeah. No, I'd agree with that. I think, I think when I still go to my comic book store, there is still some of that and everything. I wonder if it kind of diminishes I think it's a little bit different, like floppy versus a trade paperback.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Because most people, as far as I know, like if it's the comic book, like, oh, here's the first edition of this whatever Star Wars book. Great. I got the first copy. Oh, second printing, whatever. They did a variant. But to me, like trade paperbacks and stuff, like in Walking Dead, you didn't care. Most people didn't care they had, the 18th printing of Walking Dead. They just want the Walking Dead to read it. They didn't care. Maybe there is that first printing. Maybe there's I got a first printing of Walking Dead, but I don't really see it sectioned out like that. Like you're saying, like the collectability market. So maybe that might just something that still just has to live in the floppies.
Yeah, but I mean, if you're going to make these as standalone graphic novels, then they are the first printing and second printing because they are what they are. Do you know how the people who do the Kickstarters, but then the book gets printed by Image? Do you have any sort of inkling how that works out? So, for example, Mike Oming will do his comic book, and he'll run it on Kickstarter, but then he'll sell it. But Image will print it and put it in the stores.
Yeah, I don't quite have all that figured out. I know, Boom's doing that with Berserker. And Boom's doing that with other Klaus and Klaus, whatever it is. And then, so you're starting to see this a little bit more. And I think it's going to be something we're going to see together, where it's kind of like, maybe a company's going to start taking just like, well, we don't know how this is going to sell, but let's do a Kickstarter first. And then, it sells 10,000 copies, but we'll overprint it by another 10,000 and we can put those 10,000 in the shops or something like that. I think we are going to see something along those lines a little bit more. And how I don't really know, but
it makes sense in the terms of where if the artist can fund the actual production cost of making, the visual artwork for a book, and then they have the deal with the publisher when it comes to printing and distribution for, what goes into the stores. And it seems like a kind of a smart way to do it rather than to have to, dip into your life savings and pay for the comic book.
Yeah, well, there's that. Yeah, absolutely. So, I think one of my kind of lessons I'm taking away from experiencing the crowdfunding, crowdsourcing is, for me, like Amber Adams was done. So it was a little bit of an easier lift. Like I didn't have to worry about I still put the whole book together, create a new cover. I physically put it all. That's my graphic design background really came in and helped with all that. But to me, still creatively, like a Monster, I'm not going to do a Kickstarter to fund it before the book's even done. I'm not going to function like that because I don't want the response. Let's say it gets funded for 10,000, whatever. And then, but now I got all this work ahead of me and like things happen in life. So to me, I'm going to get projects done and then crowdfund it.
I think that's become the route that it has to be. I just think that too many, listen, like you said, life happens. And there have been too many of life happens, and the good intentions build, you just get bad blood after a while of too many of these things happening. So, Cave Emptor, right?
Yes.
Yeah. What did you like? So what are I'm curious because I'm truly fascinated by how this works, and you're coming at this sort of in your first round of this. What were the big takeaways in talking with the comics launch people and your research that you said, okay, I need to do this, this, and this. Like, cause your video is great. Like you have, like your production values are high, like, so was that sort of something stressed, or was like, what were the things that were stressed to you?
Well, everything was stress to me, just like,
Okay.
so what I had to do is I had to, as one, my boss likes to say, how to eat a well, one bite at a time.
Sure.
Really, I just really had to come up with my game plan. So I went through the course and learned like, okay. And I found out like, I'd forget some of it. Like, oh my gosh, where do I go with this? Okay. Like, so I did the courses like, and it's a thoroughly extensive, in-depth course, and it will blow your mind. You get to some point, you're like, I'm mush. But the great thing about it is if you get to the end, like, oh, I forget how to do this, you can circle back and rewatch or engage in that video later. Like, okay, that's right. That's how you do this particular thing. But the key thing is getting your numbers down, making sure, like, being realistic with how many people you think you can expect to back you based off of like how many people you're friends with on Facebook. Figuring out your printing costs. Well, is it $5 a copy or is it $4 a copy? You start multiplying that thing. That really can get things out of whack. But I think being a graphic designer, yes, I feel like my production values are much higher. The video they said was a very important thing. And I'm seeing that based off the numbers, like how many people are viewing it. And, it's like, okay, it's important. My original thing was, this is my studio. I was going to, me just trying to kind of shortcut things to some degree to save money and time and everything. It's like, well, I just set up, a curtain behind me and I get my iPhone out and a tripod and get a nice buy a cheap little, microphone, not cheap, but, a microphone, and I can shoot it and I can learn Premiere enough. I mean, I know enough with Adobe Premiere to putz my way through it and everything, but I'm that type of person too. Like, no, I'll take 3 weeks to get through it. But I at the end of the day, I was like, you know what? Just because I'm stressed out, I might need to lean into my family a little bit. And I have 4 brother-in-laws. They're all fantastic, but one of them works at the Channel 8 News in Richmond, Virginia. I was like, if I come up there and I wrote the whole script and everything. If I do this, I'll pay you whatever, just can you help me pull this thing together? And he goes absolutely, I'll help you. Here's what we're going to do. That you're going to come up on a Saturday. We're going to hang out. You bring your script. And I gave him I really storyboarded my script out. Like I said, the comic zooms in. I won't like spacey, airy music. So I gave him the framework so I didn't just like dump it on him because that's irresponsible. Like I gave him the framework. I was like, but I leaned on him where I knew he was an expert in, but here's the type of music I want. Here's how I envision like what should be there. And I provide him all the assets too, even before I got up there. Like, here's a 3D rendering of the book. Here's this background. Here's the wording. Like I storyboarded it out for him. So I did the heavy lifting because he was taking his time to help me.
Sure.
But, so I got up there and we went up to the studio and, he directed me. He goes, it's probably going to take about 50 times to get this right. I'm like, all right. We nailed it on the 8th time, I feel like.
Nice.
Pretty good. But he was just like, I walked out the first time. He goes, now, do you want to be wimpy, Kelly? Or do you want to be like, engaged? I was like, all right, I can do this. I can do it. So it was really kind of like he worked with me and directed me and told me like, and we did the teleprompter, which, oh my gosh,
it's so hard.
Oh, if I had to memorize everything, my script was not complicated, but if I had to remember what I was going to say with the intensity of how I was going to say it, it would have been terrible. So having that teleprompter was everything, but he did a fantastic job just directing me and telling me what to do and making me comfortable with it. I give 100,000% credit to him for helping me with it. But we just went back into an editing bay in his office and we just sat there on a Saturday afternoon and we really just collaborated back and forth. Like he laid in stuff and picked the music and it was really a collaboration. He said, you don't have to pay me anything, but I send him a gift card because you spent your Saturday with me. I'm going to let you take your wife out. And
yeah.
So that was a case of like realizing like, okay, I could do it, but it's going to be crappier. You know what I mean? And he took an extra notch. So
yeah, no, it looks great. I mean, I've seen the bad ones and that's not one of them for sure.
Yeah. And I was saying one other thing too about my actual page and everything is if you look at my video and you look at my page setup, I really try to tell a story. I introduce myself to people because there's a lot of people that cruise Kickstarter. They don't know who you are. So I set up,
Yeah.
hey, I'm Kelly Yates. I've done all this stuff before. I've done Doctor Who. I've designed toys. I've done this. So I set up my credibility first of
Yep.
who I was. And then I got and told the story. This is what I'm trying to do. I set this is the end goal, to print a 112 page book. That's the end goal. I've given you now I'm going to take you through why that, and this is what it's going to be. Here's the cover. Here's another cover. Here's the old stuff so you can look and see. So I built a story and I laid it out all in InDesign first so I could feel where things inserted or didn't insert.
Cool.
So I pre-built my story and it's really paid off. I think it's I feel like I've told a clear story with what I want and what I'm trying to do.
I think that's a great idea. You could genericize a lot of those elements and maybe sell the template as a digital tool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You could. I mean, but just help me tell the story. What story am I telling?
Well, I mean, it is. Listen, people sell things that are not comics, and so that doesn't make them storytellers. So having a tool to help them figure out how to tell the story so they can be successful in selling their thing on Kickstarter might actually be a nice investment for people.
Yeah,
so
you never know.
Yeah, you never know. All right, so you've said the thing. Give me the elevator pitch of Amber Adams and why I have to do it and pledge and get the comic.
All right. Well, first thing I'll say is blast off Amber Adams. That's always my new little catchphrase I've been using. It's kind of morphed into that. But basically, just follow the journey of Amber Adams. She's a female Flash Gordon that's putting herself out into the universe for the first time, and she's finally finding out that her family history might affect the fate of the universe.
Oh, cool.
So
nice.
Mercenaries, aliens, everything. I got to work on that pitch, my storytelling. I messed it up a little bit. I got to nail that a little bit more. And that's part of the process. I got to work on that a little bit more. And also when you do conventions like that sales pitch, no pressure, right?
It's big. I was talking to a guy at the Charlotte or the Heroes Minicon, and he's a novelist. He had his 3 books out there, and I relayed a story to him that the key, your credibility thing that you were talking about, is super important. That's website rule number 1: establish credibility.
Mm.
But the other thing is know your target audience.
Yeah,
and I know the story of a guy who went to a book fair and sat next to pretty decent selling authors. This guy self-published, had a stack of books at his table. Mm-hmm. And every time people came by, he said, oh, and he would name author X, Y, and Z. He goes, you like so-and-so, so-and-so, and so-and-so? Well, then you're going to like my book. Mm. He sold out his entire book over the weekend because he knew his audience and knew how to sell his book just in one line.
So it's funny you mention that, because I always apologize to the people on either side of me when I set up at conventions, because my sales pitch is the same thing every time. Are you a fan of Doctor Who? Yes, I have my sales pitch type of thing. So
I've heard it. I've seen it. I've heard it
1,000 times over the weekend.
Yeah. But I think you have to be that way because unless you happen to be comic famous, it's really hard for people to know who you are. And and or what you do. And once they kind of go, oh, I like those things too, let me take a look. So people like all the things that you just said. So if you like jetpacks and if you like mercenaries and all sorts of great pulpy adventure, then this is the book for you.
This is it. You're strong female leads. Yeah. You gotta work on it. So I'm actually heading to Pensacon in Pensacola, Florida this weekend. So I got to knock the rust off. It's my first show of the year. So I got to, get ready, sell my stuff and my Amber Adams stuff. So.
And you're going to be in this South Carolina Comic Convention as well, right? In, was that April?
Yes. April 17th, 18th. I can't remember. I think Yeah. I love South Carolina Comic Con. Yeah.
It's good.
It's funny. It's a really interesting show because I was invited, Robert Young invited me for the first year that they had it. Excuse me. And I went down there, and Greenville, South Carolina is an interesting place because You have your B&W plant, a lot of wealthy kind of families, and you got to kind of got your South Carolina country folk and everything. So it's an interesting blend of people dynamics for sure. Part of my family's from South Carolina, so I'm not picking on them or anything. I'm just saying that's how it is. But when I did the first show, you could tell people didn't know how to engage. Like the fan base didn't understand how conventions worked. They were like, so you sell this stuff? Like you're an art, like they didn't understand. Like they didn't understand that the dynamics of somebody like in New York Comic Con, people know, what you do. Like this, you go get this from an artist, you do that. They didn't know that. So it was really kind of fun to see that first year. And then every year's like, boom, second year. Okay, these people get it. Third year, boom, boom, boom. And now it's become this. It was a great show from the get-go, but now it's like you can see the education of the fan base understands how they work. And it's such a fantastic show. And I'll tell you something else real quick. So Robert Young is the guy that got me back into Doctor Who. And I got all I can do is thank him for it because, I was doing some Doctor Who stuff for years with IDW, and IDW had lost the license to Titan and everything. And I didn't know anybody at Titan. I'd had no in with them at all or anything. And a couple of years had gone by. I was like, well, I guess I'm never working on Doctor Who again. I guess that's it. And, Robert, they had Free Comic Book Day and they were putting Doctor Who books out for the Free Comic Book Day. And Robert wanted me to do a cover for him. I was like, great. Okay. Yeah, let's do it. And everything goes. And he says, well, send me some sample stuff you've done. And he was trying to submit it to Titan. And for whatever reason, it wasn't going through, wasn't attaching, whatever. And he was trying to explain to them, like, yeah, I want to hire this guy, Kelly Yates, do a cover. Like, oh, we know who Kelly is. He's great. Yeah, he's hired. Yeah, go ahead and use him. And it was like, oh. And then from that point, it just kind of just exploded. I've had this great run with Titan over the years, and it's just fantastic. So
that's great.
Yeah, he was the one that kind of got me back in with Doctor Who for sure.
Cool. Well, then I'll see you in South Carolina in April. That'll be fun. I will put all this stuff up in the description, so they'll have links to the Kickstarter and your website and your social media and all that stuff. Everyone can find you, chase you around, there, all that kind of stuff. This is exciting, man.
Thank you for having me on. I mean, it's always great to talk comic books, and it's almost like being in the shop a little bit, like telling stories and like, I'm
super fortunate to have conversations with some just really inspired creators, and it makes me want to be better at any craft that I undertake. So I say I thank you.
Oh man, anything I can do to inspire anybody, you inspire me, I inspire you, inspire others. That's how it should be, right?
I totally agree. All right, cool. So thanks, man. I appreciate it. And we will talk soon, I guess in like a month and a half.
Yeah.
And if you've made it this far, go click on the link to the Kickstarter.
Thank you for having me on.